On a summer evening in the boreal forest of Canada, you hear the sound before you see the creature. A thin, high whine near your ear. Then a tiny pressure on your arm. A mosquito lands, bends its body, and begins to feed. You do not hesitate. Your hand comes down. Smack. The mosquito is gone. No funeral. No guilt. Not even a pause. A few minutes later, a black fly lands near your wrist, and the same thing happens again. Another small body crushed before the thought has even become conscious. We do this constantly. We swat insects, spray them, trap them, poison them, and step on them with oat emotional weight. We may feel horror when a whale loses her calf. We may feel anger when a dog is abused. But insects sit in a different category in the human mind. Too small. Too alien. Too many. Too unlike us. So we tell ourselves something simple. They do not feel it. They are biological machines. Tiny reflex systems made of legs, wings, antennae, and instinct. They react to damage, but there is nobody inside experiencing it. But what if that certainty is wrong? What if our definition of pain has been too narrow? What if some insects, in some strange and minimal way, do not merely react to harm, but experience something bad when harm happens? To answer that, science first has to separate two things that most people treat as one. Nociception and pain. Nociception is the ability to detect harmful stimuli, heat, pressure, chemicals, injury. It is the alarm system that makes a body pull away from danger. Even simple organisms can have nociceptive responses. A body part touches something damaging, a signal fires, and the organism withdraws. That does not automatically mean suffering. Pain is different. Pain is not just information. Pain is experience. It is the unpleasant inner feeling that makes damage matter to the creature itself. A reflex can happen without anyone being home. Pain suggests that someone, in some form, is home. This is where the question becomes difficult. If an insect avoids heat, is it feeling pain, or is it only running a program? If a fly protects an injured limb, is it suffering, or is it only executing survival code? If a bee changes its decisions after a harmful experience, is there an inner world behind that choice? This is the problem of KWAH-LEA. KWAH-LEA means the raw, subjective texture of experience, what it feels like to be a living thing from the inside. What cold feels like. What fear feels like. What pain feels like before language touches it. We know our own pain from the inside. We infer pain in mammals because they have nervous systems, behaviors, and expressions close enough to ours that denial becomes unreasonable. But insects are different. They do not have human brains. They do not have faces that show suffering in a way we easily read. A bee cannot scream in a voice that reaches our empathy. A fly cannot tell us what it feels. So for a long time, the assumption was simple. Insects have nociception, but not pain. They detect damage. They respond. But they do not suffer. That assumption is becoming harder to defend. In 2012, the Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness argued that the neural foundations of consciousness are not exclusive to humans. It focused especially on mammals, birds, and other animals such as octopuses. But the deeper implication was unsettling. Consciousness may not require a brain built exactly like ours. Nature does not invent everything from zero. As Franz de Waal often argued, evolution works gradually. Eyes, lungs, limbs, emotions, intelligence, these things did not appear in one sudden human miracle. They exist in degrees, across species, shaped by different bodies and different worlds. Maybe consciousness is the same. Not a light switch. A spectrum. Humans may have complex language, memory, and reflection. A chimpanzee may have rich social awareness. A dog may have emotional memory. A bird may plan. An octopus may explore. And somewhere far down that spectrum, insects may have faint, alien forms of experience we are only beginning to notice. Look at bumblebees. In experiments, bees do not simply avoid harmful heat in a rigid mechanical way. They can make trade-offs. If a feeder is too hot, they may avoid it. But if the reward is valuable enough, they may tolerate more risk. If better options exist, they choose safety. If the reward changes, their behavior changes. That matters. A pure reflex does not weigh options. A reflex does not compare danger and reward. A reflex does not use context. When a bee changes its decision depending on what it stands to gain, the behavior starts to look less like a switch and more like evaluation. This does not prove a bee feels pain the way a human does, but it suggests the bee's nervous system is doing something more complex than simple withdrawal. Fruit flies add another disturbing clue. After injury, fruit flies can develop long-lasting sensitivity. Even after the original wound has healed, their nervous system may remain altered, reacting more strongly to later stimuli. Scientists compare this to pain-like sensitization, and in some studies, to mechanisms related to chronic neuropathic pain. Again, caution matters. We cannot say a fly lies awake haunted by pain. That would be human fantasy. But we also cannot dismiss the finding as meaningless. The body is changed by injury. The nervous system remembers damage. Behavior shifts long after the immediate threat is gone. That is not nothing. And if it is not nothing, then the moral ground beneath our feet becomes less stable. Because insects are not rare exceptions in nature. They are everywhere. In the forests of Canada, under bark, inside soil, above lakes, around flowers, in the air, in the moss, in the roots, trillions of tiny lives are moving through the world. They pollinate plants, break down decay, feed birds, fish, bats, frogs, and mammals, signal to each other, defend colonies, choose routes, avoid danger, remember locations, respond to injury. We often call them simple because they are small. But size is not the same as emptiness. A small nervous system can still be organized. A tiny brain can still process information. A creature can be alien to us and still have an inner life of some kind. That is the humility this question demands. Not certainty. Humility. Because the truth is, science does not yet know exactly where pain begins. We know nociception is widespread. We know many animals respond to harm. We know some insects show flexible, context-sensitive, injury-related behaviors. But the final question, whether there is a felt experience inside, is harder. That door is still partly closed. And maybe that is the most uncomfortable part. When the evidence is uncertain, humans often choose the answer that makes life easier. If insects feel nothing, then the mosquito under your hand is only a machine. The pesticide is only pest control. The crushed beetle on the trail is only debris. But if there is even a faint possibility of experience, the story changes. Not because every insect life must be treated like a human life. That would be impossible. But because indifference becomes harder to justify. The wall between us and them has been shrinking for centuries. We once denied pain in animals that now clearly suffer. We once dismissed animal emotion, animal grief, animal intelligence, animal awareness. Again and again, the line moved. Now the question has reached the smallest creatures we usually ignore. And perhaps the answer will not be simple. Maybe insects do not feel pain like mammals. Maybe their experience is dimmer, stranger, more fragmented, and impossible for us to imagine. But dim does not mean absent. Strange does not mean empty. Different does not mean nothing. The next time a mosquito lands on your arm in a Canadian summer, you may still swat it. Humans are animals too, and we also defend our bodies. But perhaps you will pause for half a second. Not ode of guilt. Ode of respect for uncertainty. Because behind that tiny body, behind the chitin shell, the wings, the antennae, and the nervous system so small we almost dismiss it, there may be a flicker of experience. Not a human mind. Not a human pain. But some faint inner signal saying, avoid this, escape this, survive this. And until we truly understand where Qualia ends, perhaps the most honest position is not arrogance. It is mercy.